Good evening. My name is Thurman Greco, and the name of this program is Let's Live with Thurman Greco, and it's coming to you from Channel 23 in Woodstock, New York, and from YouTube. And I am so happy. We have got the neatest guest this evening, and I am going to ask you to begin by introducing yourself. Tell us about you.
Thank you. My name's Chenault. I'm the owner of the Woodstock Lighting Lab, which just opened maybe officially 6 months ago here in Woodstock. And I've been in Woodstock for 5 or 6 years, doing different things and just really enjoying the vibe of Woodstock. Reminds me a lot of a small town version of Austin, Texas, which is where I grew up before coming up to the New York area. And lighting has just been something I've done since I was a kid. I mean, I started as a musician and got involved in music festivals, and my dad would drive me to be a part of the crew, and that just kept going all through high school. And slowly I transitioned out of music to specialize just in lighting and kind of do something different. Some people thought that was a waste, but I was like, it's far from a waste, and music actually plays a lot into what I ended up doing. I went into theater for a long time, beyond the rock and roll stuff, and went on to New York and doing Broadway shows and things like that. But eventually grew into doing museums and architecture and residences and focusing on the life aspect of lighting, which is what fascinated me. Was like, after all this flash and trash and things you can do, there's a real health aspect to lighting, and beyond how we celebrate it culturally, we've now, like, in the last 20 years, have so much more research on how lighting affects our health and improves people with dementia, Alzheimer's, if we have the proper lighting. And so that became more passion to me, to bring it to the human level than to just do entertainment and such. So it's just been an evolving life, a lifetime of learning, really, because there's so much to do. And that's what my idea is in bringing this all to Woodstock, is that there's so many choices and there's so much you can do online, but you can just overwhelm yourself. So rather than experiencing that, let's celebrate lighting and come in and look at options together. I can help whittle down choices and talk about what's important. There's a lot of artists in Woodstock, and lighting is critical, especially if you're trying to use LEDs. You have to find the quality. You can't just go out and get a light bulb and expect to be happy with what you're getting all the time. So there's a lot to sort through, and hopefully my expertise will be, I've already found in 6 months, lots of people calling, struggling to not be overwhelmed and sort through just opening a new business, and not only opening a new business, but a service that hasn't really been readily available locally, I think, before. So.
Well, now, you said you've been in Woodstock for several years. So what motivated you to start a business? What was that catalyst?
The most bizarre thing is COVID. So COVID closed a lot of businesses, and there became an opportunity, and spaces became available that weren't really available, that had already other businesses in them, but those businesses moved, unfortunately. And I was like, well, if I can find the space, instead of just renting space occasionally for community workshops, which is one aspect to what I want to do. I'm a teacher as well, so teaching lighting publicly is something I do. But the space became available, and it's the strangest time to go into retail, right, with all the masking up and people are coming in. But that was the thing for me, was let's break out of isolation and get the service going and get on the street. I just was a lighting designer in a studio. You would only know me by phone or website, or an architect or an interior designer. So the idea was, let's just see what happens. This is a great opportunity.
What brought you to Woodstock in the beginning? You said you've been here several years?
Being tired of being in the city. I think everybody reaches a point, either they get out often. I unfortunately got out only for work, so at some point I was just burnt. It doesn't have the same pizzazz that it has for a lot of people still to this day, and I love nature. Like I said, I grew up in Austin. It's a little bit more of a nature city, so I was kind of craving that. A lot of New York lost its green spaces. I got to work in a lot of public parks and public projects there and get a lot of experience there, and I still teach at the New York School of Interior Design there, mostly online from Woodstock. But, just craving to get my quality of life. I'm no longer as young as I used to be. I'd like to age gracefully and have a good time connected to nature. And lighting and nature, when they're connected, and they're not just for the frenetic energy of a city, actually is much more beneficial to us than, trying to light up and overlight spaces for productivity. So I'd much rather apply it to a Woodstock lifestyle and a Woodstock house than, necessarily city spaces.
Are you trying to be local?
Absolutely. And I think the first few years we're trying it out. How's this going to feel? This is a big life change from living in a city at full time. And then as I go into the retail environment and I start meeting people, it's so great. Like the people that come in all the time, just of all sorts, tourists coming in, locals coming in, people from Jersey coming in that aren't quite so local, but they come regularly, people from the city coming up regularly. It's just been great. Like I don't remember having this kind of connection to different people when I was working and living in the city. It was very compartmentalized. Like my business and my clients were different. This is much more broad and open.
Well, now, you have light bulbs here.
It's hard
But
to do
you
lighting.
talked about shows, doing the lighting for music productions, doing the electrical stuff, your father driving you to do that. And then you talked about Broadway shows.
Right.
And then you talked about the New York. So where are you at?
So basically I've specialized in architectural lighting for 2 decades after transitioning out of theater slowly but surely, into more of a permanent installation because I wanted to see things that last. I wanted to see an installation that lasts. It's not temporary. And the lighting and health aspect has really driven me for the past 10 years. We've gotten more and more to the point where we can prescribe the right kind of lighting for people during the daytime and nighttime. So now is the time, along with teaching, to apply that. So I'm bringing interior designers into this lifetime I've learned, that goes all the way back to creating entertaining spaces. They're creating hospitality spaces, and they're using that knowledge that I give them to keep going. So I'm just happy to pass it on to the public, happy to pass it on to my students in college, and then apply it myself. But I certainly can't do all the work that's out there by myself.
I see from what you have said 2 opportunities that are just fantastic for me. I mean, this is what is screaming out at me from what you have just said. One is you talked about health. Ulster County is, if nothing else, a healthcare hub.
Mm-hmm.
That is what drives the economy of this county. And it is so important all up the Hudson River Valley, this whole corridor, 87 corridor. You've got Albany Med. So you don't even have to go back down to the city, but you've got all of this health care. And you have doctor's offices, you have nursing homes, you have assisted living communities, you have all of these different options. So that in itself is just kind of a lot right there. And are you having to market yourself to these people?
Am I having to market myself? I would say right now I'm suffering from having too much work that
You're not marketing.
am not marketing. I'm struggling to figure out how do I get everything done that everybody's already asked me to do before I'm still open arms, bringing people in, but I'm telling them, it's going to be 2 weeks, it's going to be 3 weeks before I can get back to you with what ordinarily should just take a couple days or a few days if I had staff of 10. That's what I used to work with in is large studios. So it's interesting, and the market's overwhelming, and a lot of people think that they have to go and find design help in the city and that everything's in the city or something like that. And so it's kind of a shift.
Well, that was very interesting because I spoke to you through Eric, who has been on this show, and then I called you back and I said, oh, gee, look, I've got this opening, and you got this kind of tone to your voice, and I could tell this was where the barriers coming up We're putting up all kinds of protection.
We're
And
managing
you said-
expectations.
Right. I cannot do that until the middle of February. I said, okay.
It's true. Like something hit in October as the sun was waning and the days were getting shorter, and the phone started ringing more frequently. And then November twice as frequently, and in December 4 times as frequently, because people were all of a sudden in their homes. Maybe even they just moved up for the first time into this home this year or something. And they were like, this room has no lighting, that room has no lighting, we need help now, I need fixtures now, I need you to come by. You know, so many things just came up right as the winter was coming and the days were getting shorter, and everybody was noticing, you know, the 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. atmosphere of their homes. And
Yes.
that's just in the residential world.
Well, and 2, Woodstock homes have a feel. You know,
They have a feel, and they also have a history where people
Yeah.
have tried to DIY, or they've
Yes.
they've done some projects. You walk in and go, well, this is an interesting way to wire a light fixture or hang a light fixture.
yes.
So there's a little of that too.
Yeah.
And luckily, I found some great contractors, so when it gets to the real electrical work, you know, I can get them involved and pass that work on, because I don't need to be, you know, rewiring people's homes. I need to.
But that's what it amounts to, doesn't
Yeah.
it? When
Yeah.
you go into a house, when they tell you they need help, or an office building or whatever in
Yeah.
this area,
Yeah.
unless it's brand new, you've got, my goodness, look at that.
Right,
You
it's
do have
hard,
that.
yeah.
You know,
And sometimes you want to cherish that and celebrate those quirks. You know, makes the home have character. And sometimes you want to clean it up and
yeah.
fix it your way.
So there's a unique challenge right there. There's you know, a Hudson Valley challenge. But the other thing that has struck me so much is the fact that there used to be, when we moved up here over 20 years ago, there were shops where you could go and get a lamp fixed, and those shops are gone. They're long gone. And what they're left with is you. I mean, truly, I'm not talking Woodstock, I'm talking,
Yeah.
you know, there's just nothing there.
Yeah.
So you've got this vacuum there,
Yeah.
this void that you are stuck with, whether or not you like it. I mean, you know.
And from my perspective, you know, when I first launched the idea of the Woodstock Lighting Lab and why Woodstock needs a lighting shop, a lighting lab is a general term that we use in the lighting industry to talk about a space to test out lighting, you know. And, you know, there were so many things about sustainability, which is about the manufacturing process. This is halogen, it's glass and wire. This is LED, there's a little bit more involved, but it saves energy. And if somebody brought me in an LED desk lamp and it's not working, the switch is broken, there's a thing inside, and I call the manufacturer, it's discontinued, that thing they can't tell me what that part is. And I'm like, did we really make an LED fixture that's not fixable, that is gonna end up in the junkyard? Like, I'm just gonna have to come up with a different solution for it to bring it from being thrown away. But that's what's been going on before, is people have just been trashing their stuff. And this is heavy metals and things that can be reused, repurposed, rewired, you know, converted. It just takes time and the motivation.
Well, but now you've brought out another issue too, because a lot of things can be repurposed, recycled, whatevered, if somebody will. And I'm learning that a lot of it's not.
A lot of people aren't? Or,
Yeah, a lot of people are just not doing it.
There's
But one of the other things that has really struck me, because you have come up here by choice, and all of a sudden, and of course everybody came up here by choice. Well, I don't know.
I think it's a good choice.
I came here by choice. It's, you know, it's a good decision. But you have vacated a canyon of, I guess, thousands of offices.
It's the largest, the most office space in any city in the country, at least, if not the world, in
Right.
terms of office space.
So
square
there
footage.
you have fled.
But I've
And-
also fled the 3,000 people who are the competition that are all trying to do the same thing in the rat race. You know, I'm up here kind of by myself, as opposed to being down there.
You think there are enough people down there to deal with this? Because now we've got all these problems. We've got all these offices that are
Right.
empty and buildings that are empty, And they're going to have to be reconfigured.
Oh, you're saying maybe no more office space to be office space, but maybe it turns into residential
Or
something
whatever. I
else.
mean,
Yeah.
you know, because after all, it is New York City. We don't allow square feet to go to waste.
Right.
You know,
Every inch is
so
important.
so
know
while
what's
all
gonna
of
happen
these,
there.
you know, business owners and managers are trying to figure out what am I going to do with this?
Yeah.
The reality is that there's a lot there,
Mm.
and it's all got this energetic component.
Mm-hmm. It's the Emerald City. It's
Yes, it is. And so here we are up here in Woodstock. And you're having a grand old time.
Absolutely. Because I think, I can partly, it's stressful owning your own business. It's work every day. I think I work 6 or 7 days a week, and I try to make sure I get one day off, but that's, I notice, difficult to ensure.
Listen, if you own your own business and you've had it less than 10 years and you get one
Forget
day a
about
week
it,
off,
right?
I mean, come on now.
But other than that, I can kind of carve out a couple hours in the morning where I'm focused on my health instead of focusing on commuting, and other things that zapped my health. I went through Lyme's disease. I went through some scary, mysterious illnesses that couldn't be diagnosed. Just, did I have MS? No, it wasn't. But it was stress. Like, stress can cause so much in the body.
Okay, so this is one of your big reasons for coming up here.
Absolutely.
Woodstock is such a
change
health mecca.
Well, let's change the balance. Let's find a place where we can balance.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Woodstock is a health mecca. It's a spiritual mecca. I went through a lot of different spiritual trainings and things as well. Ultimately getting to something that's just kind of, let me focus on lighting. And it's kind of stoic. It's kind of natural flow of things, but, I think it's a peaceful place to try anything.
Listen, as an aside, if you are new to Woodstock, meaning 6 years, Peter Blum, who is quite an icon in this place, do you know him?
I know the name. I've never met him.
He's having a workshop the middle of March. Peter Blum is like, when Peter Blum walks in, we all go, So you might want to put that, because that would be something that you would enjoy.
Thank you.
So what you're telling me is, getting back to this point, away from, gossip about somebody else who's not here, what you're telling me is that you're not really putting a lot of energy into going back down there and fixing those problems of those empty buildings.
There's equal numbers of problems up here.
It's all you can deal with.
I can apply myself only a certain amount. I mean, I'm one person. There's thousands of lighting designers. I'm teaching interior designers and lighting designers to pass on that knowledge, and they can tackle those projects as well. There's huge firms that are working on stuff like that with those companies. So I think they're in good hands. I think Woodstock wasn't in as good of hands as it is now. So I'm glad to be up here.
Well, and also, I think, I don't know what your focus is, because you go into your
So much, right?
to your lighting lab and you see all these different things. You see lamps, you see these things, you see, it's like a field but it's got a whole bunch of different things. It's not like one thing you're
Right.
doing. And I ask myself, will you be focusing in at some point in the future, maybe? You can't tell
I don't
now.
know. Right. What I did basically is I put myself out there in all aspects so that you can bring a light fixture in for repair. That's one thing that some people would just do, and that would be all they do. I'm also out there as a designer who can come to your home for hourly rates and design alongside interior designers and help especially focus on the lighting aspect, or just fix up an art installation, something like that. And then it's hard to open a chandelier shop these days. There's so many fixtures out there in the world. You could end up at this huge warehouse paying tons of rent. But what I do is I can connect people to the trade prices, the things that are at the lowest discount, and take a small markup as opposed to as big of a markup as other people, and that can make everyone happy. It's making the lighting more accessible to people, and I'm helping them make the choices so they're less stressed about it. And that ultimately might be easier for me down the road than all the parts and all the things for the lighting repairs. But I think all the services are important, so I'd rather end up hiring assistants that can help keep all these things going, whether it's purchasing and new stuff and light bulbs and DIY parts and workshops and repair, just keep it all going and get more people involved.
Well, and I'm imagining, because I don't know the people who are purchasing all the houses that have come for sale.
Mm-hmm.
And I am imagining that people have come to the Hudson Valley and they have dropped into a different planet.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't quite figure it out yet.
Right. And they haven't quite noticed that everything's not at the moment's call.
Right.
Doesn't always work as smoothly as it should.
Right. And you know, and the plumbing in this building is a little strange, and the electricity's not quite, there's no super. You know?
That's right. I did find myself in someone's house helping them put the outlet back in so that the stove would work. You know, and totally non-lighting. I was like, you know, this is the terrible cold time. I want to make sure their stove works. We're going to fix that outlet. You know, it was just a simple mounting thing, not even the wiring. But I do find myself sometimes like being the super and saying, this is the easy solution. You can take it further.
Yeah. So that's really what you are. I really think so. I mean, what do you do? You've been here 6 years.
I know.
You're talking to a person been here 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
And they've got a lot of questions.
Oh, sure. Oh, sure.
And you're standing there and you've got some answers.
My colleagues laughed at me when I sort of told them, because I've been teaching for 10 or 12 years and I have meetings every year. And I said, this year, this shop is open. And they were like, bless you. You know, for putting your neck out there. Good luck. But they would not dream of doing that themselves. They would stay in a studio. They would keep their private sort of connections and clients that way. But
Keep the protection up.
the protection and the boundaries.
But you know what you've got going there?
What's
And
that?
I bet you do know. You've got a book going.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I guess if I could ever find the time to write it.
You
I don't know
will.
where
You
to
will
start
one
and
day.
Finish it, but
You will one day. To 8 or 10 years from now, you will.
10 years.
Because you've
that's
got
a
all
good
these
deadline.
different people,
Yeah.
and you've got all these different problems that they have encountered because they came up here.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
And all those things that I then encounter informs me. So I go, oh yeah, I saw this before.
Yeah.
You know, that's how I got to where I am now. Is I've done this before. I've helped light cities. I've helped light museums. I've helped light restaurants. I've done every project type imaginable at some point. You know, I can tell the stories about the contractors or the equipment or how it all worked out.
Yes. And of course, the museums are a whole other.
Yeah.
That's a whole other world.
Well, because light, as beautiful as it is, degrades all organic material. So you have to be careful if you want to preserve art, but we also want to see art. And so you're having to always kind of do calculations or some sort of a, you know, control over how much light is on the art. What do we see? How do we see it? Is that the way the artist intended us to see it? You put LEDs into the equation and it could throw everything off, or everything could be just fine. But it's a difficult practice, ultimately.
So, do you have any advice for a new person?
To
Do you
Woodstock,
Yeah.
take it slowly, slow down, put your phone down.
Yeah.
Yeah, consider why you're here and what it's really about, because I think it's more of a soul searching that you can do here than anywhere else.
Well, and I find, because you came from Austin, I come from Texas. And I never admit that to anybody
Oh my
else.
God.
Oh, never admit that to anybody.
I went through years of not admitting it, but I'll admit to it.
Well, I don't mind Austin,
Right?
but you know the things that are coming out of Texas
Oh,
right
yeah.
now.
No, yeah, it's always kind of.
I tell.
I miss Ann Richards, but anyway, we won't get into. We should not get into all that.
Well, I miss some other people too.
Yeah.
Mainly, I miss some people that these people have replaced.
Yeah.
You know, and it's getting really bad. But you know, I just tell people I'm from the South. But you know, it's one thing to come up here from the South. It is another thing to come up here from the city.
True.
You know about grass, maybe.
Grass. Green grass? I did see some when I grew up, because I grew up in Nashville, outside of Nashville, in Tennessee and Virginia and North Carolina, so grass and trees are my thing.
Yeah.
That was actually what was most sad to me, was I was working really hard in the city. Finally got to like the highest level jobs I had had, and I'm trying to have lunch for 30 minutes somewhere in the middle of this crazy 10-hour day, and the green spaces in the city were disappearing. And Bette Midler was trying to keep all these gardens going for a long time. She was one of many people trying to do that. And I just remember more and more, I was like, unless I walk all the way to Central Park, which would take my whole lunch hour, unless I go all the way to this park in the lower Manhattan, there's not that many options. And that became disturbing, because there I was trying to find the balance just for half an hour in the middle of the day, and it was becoming difficult, more and more difficult.
Yeah. So that's a real thing,
Grass is real.
And plus, there's no sidewalks.
Here, they're falling apart, but...
There's no sidewalk on my street.
Oh, there you go.
There's a sidewalk on your street.
Yeah, I live in town, but...
Yeah, I live in town too, but I'm only one street over. I'm one street over, and there's no sidewalk.
It's a whole different world.
And I had somebody stop me several months ago, and she said, there's no sidewalks here. And she was just so exasperated. And I listened to her, and finally I said to her, listen, lady, you're talking to the wrong person. If I ever call the town supervisor up and complain, he'll just string me up. You're going to have to do this yourself. I said, my reputation's too bad. It won't work for me. But there is this change.
I feel like we're right on the edge of a big change, like a big town renovation of sorts. I mean, I don't want to see things gentrified, and I had to actually move out of a house and above the store because I can't find an affordable place to live that's not in my business, so I don't want to see more of that kind of change, but I do think we can all come together into making a better town space. And the end of town that I'm on especially, I look outside the street sometimes and I'm like, am I in the Bronx? Like, this is not okay, and right now it's hard because there's so much dirty snow and there's so much ice and things are out of sorts, but it's a tough side of town sometimes, and there's so much going on, there's so much creativity right next to me that I just can't wait. Like, I think this is the best year it's going to be.
I certainly hope so.
We need a good year after the past few.
Well, we've had some good years. We've had some good years here. But small towns have a different attitude. So it's like they're going through culture shock, which is an interesting thing. And your contribution is going to make their culture shock easier.
I think so. I mean, I have a lot of great conversations with people, whether they end up needing my help now or in the future. There's a lot of different perspectives on light. There's a lot of different reasons for the different qualities of light that people want in the space, whether it's for productivity or creating art or viewing art or living a nice romantic evening. There's a lot of conversations, and there's a lot of disinformation and thoughts about what light should be at what times of day. So I'm happy to help and have those conversations.
How do you bring the health concept into this?
Well, it's at the simplest level, you can talk about it in terms of following the natural cycle of day. And our society isn't so great at saying, well, that means our day is shorter in the winter and longer in the summer, but that is a part of it. But to give people as much light as possible during the daytime, if you're in an interior space, you need a lot more light electrically than you might think. And then the same inverse is true at night. They need to be in darkness. You need black curtains if you have street lights pouring in your window. You might even have street lights in Woodstock pouring in your window. So at the simplest level, it's just that contrast of really bright daytime, really dark nighttime. And then you have to get more specific if there's a specific space and all those, requirements of what you're doing, if you're working, things like that. But The idea is to be as comfortable as possible, but get the light output that you need and not waste energy at the same time.
What about, you were talking about for people with dementia, how does that work?
Well, so there were studies done. It took about 7 years to actually find the evidence to create what's called evidence-based design, as opposed to, well, you know, my friend did this and they felt better. So about after 7 years of documenting an Alzheimer's center, what they saw was that if there was red lighting for the nurses at night and basically blackness for the patients, and if the patients were then in the daytime, not just left to the regular lighting that we're used to, but given really bright light tables, if they couldn't go outside, really bright light tables. We now have fixtures. Some people use those fluorescent light boxes, but there's better fixtures for it. Give them a lot of light and keep it regular as a regular schedule. And they documented existing patients that were sleeping through the night, which is really hard for Alzheimer's, and other examples of how the lighting was putting them back into a natural cycle. And if you can get back into your natural cycle, then you can start to heal yourself more naturally, more internally, personally, from that one benefit. And then all the other stuff starts to work better. The other thing that this crosses over to is chemotherapy. If you see people going through chemotherapy, chemo is applied at certain times of day when the body is tuned to what it is going to do. And there's different times for different treatments. And that's related to the same thing, circadian rhythm of our bodies. And we want to keep that in a natural flow and not get off track. So not enough light during the daytime really throws off our bodies. And not being able to sleep through the night also throws off our bodies.
What do you do when somebody comes to you and says, I can't sleep?
Try to find out why. Try to find out if they're watching TV all the way up until the point they're trying to go to sleep. Do they have any sort of a sleep? I'm not a sleep medicine doctor, but I do understand certain things. And I've had my own experiences of not being able to sleep for various reasons. And there's also some difference of thought as whether we should sleep through the night 6-8 hours, or if we should have a second sleep. And we can have 4 or 5 hours and then get up for an hour or two and then go back to sleep for 4 or 5 hours and have a really great experience from that too. So it's not always about the goal being the same for everybody, but the busier we are, the harder it is for people. And if you don't live alone, the harder it is for you to be able to pop up for a couple hours in the evening and have some sort of a spiritual practice that happens then, or reflection, or journaling, things that are...
Do the dishes.
And then you can go back to bed and let your mind just clear and then go back to bed.
So if somebody comes to you and says they're having trouble sleeping, do you give them special lamps?
No, not so much. It's more about the brightness and the darkness and having that contrast and talking to them a little bit about color temperature. So a halogen bulb can be really warm. An LED has a range. It can be warm, it can be cool. And so it can be faster, more alerting if we have cool color temperatures at a bright intensity during the day, and then we dial it to warm color temperatures at low intensity at evening. The lower, the better. And when they understand that and they start using a dimmer or something to control intensity themselves, they start to be able to influence how they go to bed at night.
Wow.
And so you don't have to use these big fluorescent boxes that you stare at for 10 hours or 10 minutes every day. You can do it in other ways, but it might take more time. It might take the whole day you're in a well-lit space, as opposed to, I'm going to do this 10 minutes, then I'm going to go back to my dark room.
So what you're telling me is that in years past, we had, like, what was it, SADD, when people suffered because they didn't have enough light?
Right.
That now you use different lighting?
Yeah, because while SAD was sort of coming along and people understood there was a lack of light, they didn't understand how much light would reset the clock. They didn't understand a lot about that. And they didn't understand that if they just changed the lighting that they were experiencing in their office all day long, that they weren't going to need the SAD treatment in the morning before they went to their office. They could just have better lighting all day. And we also only 15, 20 years ago learned, and we're still learning, about our blue light photoreceptors, which are separate from our visual system, that is simply all about resetting our circadian rhythm and creating that alert wakefulness that we have.
Can you explain that a little bit for people who do not know?
So we used to only think of our eyes as being for visual purposes of seeing and navigating. And we had the rods and the cones. We had our color vision and our black and white vision. And then in around 2001, they finally discovered a whole other set of photoreceptors in the eye that are very finely tuned to blue light, kind of like the color of the blue sky. And evolution or whatever, that seems to reset our circadian rhythm when we see that light at a certain intensity. It says it's daytime, it's morning. And the SAD treatment is really just triggering that circadian rhythm reset. So there's all kinds of ways of triggering that reset that doesn't have to be an ugly box that you stare at for 10 minutes. It could be that you have a task lamp that glows next to your computer, or it could be that you spend more time looking out your window in the morning for 10 or 15 minutes and just letting the sunlight come in and hit you in the face. So now we've been spending the last 15 or 20 years becoming more prescriptive, because the way my industry works, the Illuminating Engineering Society says, yeah, design is great, but let's get the evidence. And so they've been spending the last 15 or 20 years, a lot of the work's being done in Rensselaer in Troy, New York, to study, is it the amount of time, is it the intensity, is it a combination? And we haven't quite fully agreed, but we've gotten a lot smarter in the last 15 years that there's lots of ways of achieving it. But it's a combination of cool color temperatures and high intensity during the day, and then warm color and less blue or no blue light. So people that are using their phones, it's also kind of documented, you're looking at your phone all the way up to the point you go to bed, it can shift your sleep cycle by an hour. Because there's enough blue light in a phone screen that's kind of slowing your body from realizing it's nighttime, slowing down the melatonin that would put you to sleep, and it's lengthening your day.
So that there are lighting reasons why people are sometimes not sleeping as well. Then
Can be, it's not known to be extremely, a huge deficit, but they have proven at least an hour from just screen time usage. And there have been advances in the phones to try and have a night shift that makes the light a little bit warmer on the phone. But what like Rensselaer has been studying is that the intensity of the screen is still important. So unless the intensity is going down, just warming up the screen is not going to help you go to sleep. You've got to dim it down or turn it off. I try to put it down for a couple of hours before I go to sleep. Just that's the end of that. And now we're going to go into our pre-sleep time.
I have a friend who manages a sleep clinic, and she believes that there should be no blue lights in any bedroom.
Yeah, I went through a long time, and I think LEDs have improved now to a point that I can comfortably, suggest certain LED lamps in a bedroom. But that used to be the biggest problem, because LEDs start as a source, as blue light, and we use phosphor coatings. That's why the LED has yellow tint to it. That's phosphor coatings that take the blue light that's inside and turn it into white light. What we see is white light. So there was always this peak of blue light that we don't really see with our eye, but you can see with a computer scan that has gotten better. And LEDs that are cheap are going to be more of a problem than LEDs that have higher quality. They've been more focused on improving that. But there was a time where I would say only use halogen light bulbs in your bedroom and have dimmers and things like that for that reason. But so that's the thing, the technology moves. It's like computers. Every 18 months we're making advances that are doubling efficiency or improving color. So it moves quickly.
Where would you use this lamp?
So this is a beautiful bulb, which used to be like street lamps. The old street lamps used to have these big envelopes. But instead of having the bright light source, this is halogen, so it's little wires, and on a dimmer it looks really beautiful, and it doesn't get that bright. So the best thing with something like this is to hang it over a dining table, and it's a fixture in itself. The bulb itself is the fixture. There's no shade. That's all you need. And then you would have your candlelight and your other lighting around the space, but it's really a decorative, almost sculptural piece. And that's part of the hold on that I still am attached to is, I think these things are beautiful sculptures. They may not be the most energy efficient sources of light, but you don't use this as a task light. You use this as a dining light, as a small private space sort of accent. So that's what I prefer.
What is this one for?
This is kind of a favorite a lot of people like. It's called a half silver. So as a ceiling fixture, as a wall fixture, the light is focused at the surface, and you don't have any direct view of the bulb, so you don't get glare. That's one of the biggest problems with lighting is you have to control for glare. So this is, again, kind of like a fixture in the light bulb already designed. So the whole thing is all you need with a socket, and you've got a beautiful wall sconce or beautiful ceiling fixture.
So what you have, not always or exclusively or whatever, is you have some light bulbs that do not necessarily require a shade.
Exactly. And these are things that sometimes you won't find in hardware stores anymore because everyone's moving on to LEDs. They want to do things that are more efficient. And I'm like, well, let's keep some of these things that I think, curate what I think is important for people to have access to. And then I advise them, to use dimmers so that you lengthen the life and you look at it more sustainably.
And so when people come to you and they've purchased a new home, say a person has come to you and they've purchased a home and they don't know what to do, what do you start with? What kind of questions do you ask?
It's a lot because, ultimately, as much as we can talk about science and engineering of lighting, it comes down to being very subjective. So what I prefer in the evening may be different or similar to what you prefer in the evening in terms of color, in terms of brightness, and all of us have different lifestyles. Some of us have kids and we want to have all this activity going on to a certain point and have control. So I have to ask a lot of questions about how you're currently living with what you're used to, or have you ever seen good lighting? What do you like? And it's about taste. And decorative stuff is the hardest because you're not just talking about the amount and color of the light, but then there's the sculptural form of the fixture that you have to agree and find their tastes and qualities. So I just try to be flexible and I just try to understand everyone's going to need something a little different. And
If somebody comes to you for lighting, do they come to you before they have painted?
Unfortunately, they don't. No. Ideally, I'm the person that should be hired alongside the architect and before the contractors. But I oftentimes get people that have already hired the contractor. They're already in construction. They've already made some decisions, and they might have gotten to their wits' end, and they now need help. So I have to be able to jump in the middle, the beginning, the end. But ideally, earlier the better, because you can do more with lighting if you can also form the space and work with the architecture. If I have to come in and don't touch anything but use everything that's existing and just make new things attach, it's much harder. It's like the wiring isn't there. You have to use what's there. So starting in the beginning at the process is much better than jumping in the end. But I do it all as much as I could.
When we were in Virginia, we had, and I did not realize then how talented he was. And you could talk to him. And when we came up here, I realized that when you're working with a building, you've got the building. Is it 100 years old? Is it 10 years old? Is it, what is the building?
Right.
And you have got the contractor and everything that contractor has experienced up to this moment.
Yeah.
Because some of them can do things and some of them don't want to do things. So you have all of these, you have the skill levels, but you also have, it's like you almost need a therapist sometimes.
And sometimes that's been my role. I'll be talking to a designer and it's like you're the therapist for a little bit because they're going through whatever the challenge is. It's a very challenging industry across the board. It doesn't matter if you're in the design seats or you're the contractor or you're the homeowner. It's stressful from all angles. I have a feeling, I used to walk into spaces and go, why is that like that? And after doing it, I'm like, there's a story as to why that's like that.
That's what I'm saying. You have a book coming. I have a new neighbor. I have not met her yet, who bought a house. I think she bought the house about a year ago, and they haven't moved in yet.
Yeah.
She's got to be.
And it's
disgusted, sick, whatever.
I know, you want your life back. I went through a renovation once, and it was supposed to be 6 months, and then it was 9 months, and then you're just like, okay, I had the marker on 6 or 8 months. Now it's 9. It's really hard for me to keep going like this. You
Yeah.
know, it's like, I want my life back. Get out. Get out of my house.
Yeah.
But, you know, what happens is you walk into spaces, and as planned ahead as you can be, there are surprises. And whether that's a surprise in the space, or that's a surprise in the whole line of purchasing and receiving and the materials, or it's anything can come up that throws things off. And then there's the whole people factor. I mean, we just dealt with 2 years of our people factor is pulling ourselves in and out of work. Can I go to work today? Am I not able to get to work today? What's going on? You know? So there's a lot of reasons why. We basically say it's going to take twice as long and cost twice as much, jokingly, than whatever you originally kind of estimated, because things get haywire sometimes. We've all heard about that.
Well, and I don't know. Do you really think now, when you start something, do you think are you going to finish it even with the people that you start?
That could be true. It could be true. I mean, it's helpful to keep everyone together and keep moving, no matter if it slows down a little bit, because people are familiar, they know what's needing to be done, but it's definitely a challenge, you know.
And in my neighborhood, all of the contractors have got 2 jobs that they're working.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's just got 1 job.
Yeah. I mean, you can't make a living doing 1 job at a time.
No.
They're not going to come pretty in sequence when you're ready, just like me talking about being overwhelmed. The people aren't going to show up just in the speed that you want them to. They're going to come in packs, and they're going to come in rushes, and
Yeah.
you're going to have periods of time when you can maybe get a moment off, a day off. But everyone is super busy, and I think I see people get wrapped up in big projects, and then they can't think about anything else other than that big project. So I try to help out and I like kind of being one person removed. I'm not the interior designer, I'm the lighting specialist, you know. I'm not the architect, I'm the lighting specialist. So I'm used to, and that started in theater, I'm used to doing 5 shows at once, working on this one, I'm in the theater for this one, I know I'm going to be in that town next week for that one, and just keep going and keep it changing, which is actually the most interesting to me, is to keep changing.
I'm curious, are you working beyond Woodstock?
Well, I teach online, which is mostly, you know, city focused, or the students could be in China or India, but I am currently basically trying to stay focused in Woodstock and the miles around it. You know.
So you're really not trying to get into Rhinebeck, or you're not trying to go up to Albany or over
so
to
much.
Hudson or whatever?
Not so much. I mean, maybe Rhinebeck a little bit. I do have clients that come from Rhinebeck to me and bring things to be repaired and such. But, you know, there are firms, there are some design places, there are people who will practice lighting design, who are the contractor or they're the salesperson or whatnot. So there are markets that are already in Albany and such that if I was hurting for work, I could start trying to edge
Yeah.
up there, but it's like, there's enough here, I'm fine. I've even thought about limiting it to 10 miles around Woodstock, because, you know, that would just maybe kind of temper the amount of work that needs to be done today.
Well, you can, right now, I think you could just almost go right here.
Right.
You know, there's enough
There's
to
so
keep you
much.
busy.
Yeah.
But what happens, and you have to tell me whether or not I'm wrong, what happens when this market is done?
I don't know. I don't know if that ever really happens. You know, different people basically have different timing of when they're ready to do work. Like I said, 10 people call me on 1 week in October because they all noticed, but there was another 100 that noticed but didn't, you know, do anything about it. They didn't put it on their to-do list. So I think there's enough going on that I'll eventually get to every home. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, there's so many that I don't think it's going to dry up. And then the other thing that can happen is we can go through a period of time where something's good for 5 years, and then you're ready for an update. Maybe there's something changed about your lifestyle. Maybe now you have different art. Maybe there's a reason to update some part of your space. A lot of times what I'm doing right now is there's a whole home that's existing, and they just want to focus on a few rooms, and there's other rooms that could be dealt with later.
Right. This is what we want to do now.
This is our budget for this year, or something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So you see yourself as being part of Woodstock permanently.
I feel that, yeah, absolutely. And then, just branching out, the only branching out I really think about doing is branching out as a teacher and branching out with the education, putting more stuff online that's available and accessible to everyone and not just my college students that are enrolled in my college classes, but spreading out my experience, like you're saying, writing a book. Well, maybe I'm writing the book a chapter at a time by putting out, other material.
I see you as offering classes through Ulster County.
Oh yeah, that's a good option. I've been talking about it, pre-COVID. I said when this all wraps up, I'm ready to sit at a table with the wires, and some people are just afraid to take the 2 wires that are necessary to connect to this to make this happen, and it's a very easy thing to demonstrate, and then you might actually love knowing that.
No, I don't
so
want
that
to.
you don't have to call the super, I don't know.
Listen, I really don't want to know that.
Well, some people do.
Yeah, and I'm sure that some people will. Hey, this is a whole new career for them, because
Absolutely. Well, there's
they
that
learn
too.
to do these things.
And that's what a lot of what I learned in school or teaching my students is that people are making career changes constantly. I've taught people that used to be journalists that are like, not a good time to be a journalist, or I've taught people that were
I
in
think now is a
advertising.
terrible time to be a oh my.
So there's lots of people that are getting into design more and more because isn't it great to spend your day focused on beauty and quality of life and things like that?
Right, and listen to nice music and create and certainly, why not? Well, so when do you see you're bound to have, because you're right there, you are on the cutting edge right here now. Do you have any idea when the market is going to change?
In what sense? Which market?
That's very good. I want to know, do you see any end to, I think Woodstock is full.
In terms of real estate market?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think you could rent a park bench. You can't rent a pup tent at this point. I don't think.
Only on Airbnb, evidently.
I don't listen. I don't see
It's
it.
very frustrating. I mean, I don't know what the solution is. I've dealt with urban planners and lighting for cities, and I look at this as like, how did we get here so fast? I've been up here since 2017 or so, and the rents in just the 5 years have more than doubled or tripled.
It's gone crazy.
It's gone crazy. And
So do you think it's reached a plateau?
Well, what I have always noticed about Woodstock is that different people come and stay for different lengths of time. Some come up here at different markers in the history of the city, 9/11 or stock market this or COVID that. I came up kind of in between all of them. But some people don't stay. Some people come up for a year and they go, well, this is winter. And this will be the last winter. And they'll go on back somewhere. Maybe they then rent their house out on Airbnb. I don't know. But I don't think everyone stays. I think I've made a decision that I want to stay. And I hope that we get more involved as a community on building affordable housing or housing that is affordable. It's not the term, it's the function. Like, we need to be able to afford to live where we're living. So I hope we find those strategies, because there's definitely a lot of projects on hold and things that have gone on the past couple of years that need a lot more brain trust, a lot more thought about.
I just used to, we had a real estate market that was definitely with the calendar.
Mm-hmm.
It went from about Easter to maybe right after Labor Day or
Sure.
something. And if you didn't sell your house, then you took it off the market and brought it back on. That's not true anymore.
I know. I was in a house, went on the market January of last year, and I think it sold in a week. And I said that to a friend of mine. They were like, "What took so long?" And it was heartbreaking. I was just like, "Wow, this really is moving that quickly,"
Oh my God.
Oh my God!
In a week.
In the winter.
Yeah.
In January.
Yeah.
It was.
So I'm wondering when people are going to get homesick, especially now that rents and things are dropping in the city.
Yeah, I don't know. I just saw something recently. They're going back up. You know, that the holiday is over in terms of finding places in the city that people are struggling. That people had gone home, like they're in North Carolina at their parents' house, and they're looking for their new New York City apartment, and they can't find it, and they certainly can't find it remotely.
No.
And they're having to go through what we all went through if we ever tried to get a city apartment. You know, there's 10 people that want the same place.
Well, and of course, nobody wants to work there anymore. That's the feeling I get.
I don't know. I mean, I think there's certainly some of that. I don't want to. I find myself not wanting to commute. You know, I used to love getting on the train and taking the train to the city and having that time to do whatever I wanted, and then getting back out and coming back up here. But I would dip in for the day, and then I'm ready to go home now, you know. But that doesn't even interest me that much anymore. There's enough going on up here. It really is in my life. Maybe it's not a big, you know, happening city right now, but there's enough happening in my life.
Yes, my life is kind of overwhelmed as well.
Yeah.
So, do you have any advice for someone who is thinking of starting a business in Woodstock?
You know, on some levels, I think it's the greatest place to start a business because you can open and close whenever you want. I think the biggest joke of some of these shops is how few days we open or how few hours we open to the public. It allows you to be experimental, so you can try things out. I don't think you can try things out if you're trying to open a shop in the city. I also don't think the clientele is the same. Up here, I feel like everyone is welcoming to see what they see. They go, oh, this is great. These artists are, oh, he's doing lighting. Oh, they're doing clothes. Oh, they're doing this. Oh, they're doing that. And in the city, people are not going to be that open and, you know, interested in all the creativity that we're doing here. So I think it's a great place to experiment.
Oh my goodness, we're down to 4 minutes. Thank you so much, Miss Ellen. Well, listen, how about advertising for yourself for a few minutes?
Any more than I have?
Tell us how to get in touch with you.
Okay, yes. The Woodstock Lighting Lab, you can find me physically at 71 Tinker Street, the corner of Nair. The website as well, woodstocklightinglab.com. And that's the best way. You'll see my phone number, you'll see my email there. But really just drop on by. I'm usually there 12 to 4, especially right now Thursdays through Sundays. So we can have a conversation, because like I said, everyone has a different reason for talking about lighting.
So when you say you're there from 12 to 4, that means that you make client visits
before, usually.
Before or after.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you're there. One of the interesting things that I saw is that I saw some interesting lamps and things. Do you sell lamps?
Yeah, I have a few fixtures that are there that are examples of modern fixtures from catalogs, but a lot of what I'll have in stock are fixtures that either myself or friends have created from reclaimed materials. I'll have wall sconces that are made from old kitchen cabinets, or found objects that turned into a sculpture. So the things that are there are representative of stuff that's very local, very sculptural and artistic. But of course, what I do is then facilitate purchasing of anything that's out there. Instead of using the online showrooms, I can kind of connect you to direct to the manufacturer. So all sorts of levels of clientele.
What is the best way to get into your store? Now, the first time I found you, I walked up the steps.
Yeah, so there's a funny thing. We're in the back of this
Headstock.
house, which is Headstock & Co., which is in the front. So you can come up the front stairs and go through the front shop. Or around the side, there's actually a parking lot, nice place to park your car, customers, and come in the side door, big red door on the side. You'll see the glass window, says Woodstock Lighting Lab. So it's on Nair Street, on the side of the house.
So that's really a nice way.
It's
I
a
went in
perfect
there the other
location,
day, and
yeah.
that was really, really
It's
nice.
just a few steps. It's not completely handicap accessible, but it's just 3 steps, and you're in.
Handicap accessible.
Oh, it's impossible.
Handicap accessible is a figment of someone's imagination.
Should not have been, but maybe it is.
Right, it really is. I don't mean that maliciously, but I've been in business for 40 or 50 years, and I have yet to have anything that was handicap accessible. I mean, it just wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. We're dealing with all these old homes and things.
Well,
like
and
that.
I've office buildings and whatever, and
Yeah.
people will look at you straight in the face and say, "Oh, we're handicap accessible," and you get there and they're not. They don't even know what that means. You know, and that doesn't make any difference whether it's here or for Washington D.C. or New
Sure.
York City. It just doesn't make any difference.
Yeah. Well, knowing from architecture, they didn't make it as so much of a requirement. You can get sued for not doing it, but they didn't really make it, coded as a requirement. So people sort of do it and sort of don't.
Yes. Well, listen, I want to thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming. You've been such a wonderful guest. And thank you so much, Ellen. It's been so nice. And hopefully, you'll go into something very busy this summer. And then in the fall, we can talk about you coming back.
Oh my goodness.
Yes,
Sounds great.
and helping with our lighting. And thanking you so much. I look forward to seeing all of you on the YouTube channel, Let's Live with Thurman Greco.